everyone, welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about TikTok, specifically the recent resignation of TikTok USA CEO Kevin Mayer and what this means for foreign nationals, Western nationals who are interested in working for Chinese tech companies during the ongoing US-China tensions, as well as my personal thoughts on the resignation of this CEO. So, let's get into it. So, before we get started, it's important to point out, it's important to remember that we don't necessarily know the full story behind why Kevin Mayer decided to resign as CEO of TikTok USA. Currently, we only have a statement that it was his decision that he chose to step down amid the current troubles that TikTok is experiencing. Whether or not additional information comes out in the future, we're not sure. If more information comes out that has a bearing on this topic, we will of course go back to it. We will discuss it at that time, but for now we're going to proceed under the assumption that it was fully Kevin Mayer's decision to resign. When I first heard about the appointment of Kevin Mayer, I think I felt two different types of emotions. On one hand, I thought there was some excitement, some anticipation, because for those of you who know me, who follow me on social media, I'm very clearly a supporter of Chinese companies, Chinese tech companies, as they strive to grow bigger and go abroad. And so as we see more opportunities for foreign executives, foreign managers to work in key positions in Chinese companies, to me it says that the Chinese companies are taking the overseas market more seriously. They are hiring key people that can advise them and work with them, and also clearly understand the needs of the foreign market. So that's always an exciting thing to see for Chinese tech companies from my perspective. On the other hand, a kind of opposing viewpoint or feeling was, okay, well, is this a real position, a real appointment? And the reason that we say that is, on one hand, we've seen a number of other foreign executive Chinese companies. I think Hugo Barra was one of them for Xiaomi, who just haven't lasted very long. And this could be due to cultural differences. It could be due to a number of factors, but cultural and language differences can be a big issue. Another factor, which I do not really think applies so much to Chinese tech companies, but it is possible, is that Chinese companies do have somewhat of a history of employing white faces, foreign faces, as kind of people they put on a pedestal to represent the company more from a marketing perspective without that much actual authority. Do I think this is very widespread these days in many big Chinese companies, private companies? No, I don't think it's that widespread. I think the cultural differences play a much bigger role in terms of causing issues, but it is an important point to be aware of, because it doesn't manifest itself in some ways, whereas if you're talking to Chinese customers, investors, even these days, you sometimes will see white faces in advertisements. And certainly back in the day, after China started opening up, there were lots of local companies that would hire foreign faces simply to sit at press conferences to appeal to local Chinese investors, to make them think that, oh, we have these Western investors. And so, again, not probably the biggest issue, but it is certainly something that comes up when we're thinking about all these potential issues that might be behind the appointment of a Western CEO for a Chinese brand in an overseas market. So there's a mix of excitement, but also kind of wondering, okay, well, how long might this last? What are the real reasons for this? Though, of course, I like to give companies the benefit of the doubt, because I do see, from my experience at Huawei and working with other Chinese companies as a consultant, I do see more and more willingness to consider foreigners, Westerners, for key positions if they have the right skills, and then kind of work through the cultural issues. Now that we kind of have some of the background about my initial thoughts and others' initial thoughts when the announcement of Kevin Mayer's appointment was made, now let's move on to maybe how I felt, how people might feel when he left, quite suddenly. Now, before his departure was announced, we all knew that TikTok was having, problems. I'll get more into my specific thoughts on the actual case, the validity of the case against TikTok by the U.S. government. Spoiler, it's BS. But we won't talk about that in this video. But when, after such a short time, we saw that Kevin Mayer was resigning, he was just leaving TikTok and moving on. And again, as I mentioned earlier, with the assumption that this was fully his decision, I personally felt a large degree of disappointment. Now, why is this? Why did I feel disappointment? Because on one hand, as we talked about before, I thought there was a lot of opportunity with Western CEOs, or overseas, doesn't have to be Western, overseas CEOs being put into higher level positions at Chinese companies, Chinese tech companies, which can give them more opportunities to really succeed abroad. And so on that front, it seems like, maybe assuming TikTok came out ahead in the US case, which we don't know what will happen as of the recording of this video, it kind of seems to limit their options more if a key high-level player is walking out. But I think more so, my greater feeling is that he simply cut and run, with the assumption again that it was fully his decision. He just gave up, and I think this speaks also to how I feel about these high-level, well-known global CEOs deciding to come over to work for Chinese companies. It seems to me like it may be more for fame, for glory, just they want to expand their resume and show that they can work for a Chinese company too. And it just seems like a move to boost their CV, whereas having worked long-term in multiple Chinese companies, and especially a Chinese tech company like Huawei, those of us that have, we know that it does take a lot of tenaciousness, a lot of bullying your way forward, a lot of being patient, adapting to different cultural norms to be able to be effective, to communicate effectively with your colleagues. And so as I've seen so many people, not speaking so much to myself, but people that are with more experience, to have had this tenacity, this drive to be able to cross those boundaries, and then seeing someone who's previous person in charge of Disney, and then he just comes over and decides to leave after a few months, to cut and run, is honestly how I feel about it. It really just and it makes me feel bad too, because what if other Chinese companies need to expand abroad and they are looking for help? They really want to succeed. They really want to appeal to their foreign customers. But what happens if they see what Kevin Mayer did and they decide, okay, well, maybe we can't trust these foreign executives, these Western executives, because they aren't in it for the long haul. They aren't willing to commit themselves to our company. And to me, that's kind of what being a high-level executive or CEO means if you're going to join a company. If you join a company, and again, there can be different reasons why you have to leave a company. Sometimes you're forced out. Sometimes there's a reorganization. We all understand that. But again, without any information pointing to that as an outcome or as a reason for his departure, it just strikes me as a lack of commitment. And I'm worried that other Chinese companies, if they see this, they will be less inclined to take a risk to hire someone who can really help them understand overseas consumers. Because when it comes down to it, as I've mentioned in other videos, in my articles on my website, working for, you could say a Chinese company, but really for any other company that is not your culture, that is not your language, it can be very challenging. You can't just go in and give orders as normal. You have to work at it every single day. You have to be thinking about your culture, your language, their language. You have to be thinking about how to build a team with people from different countries, and you can't just simply come in with a short-term mindset. And what we're seeing now, what we're seeing more and more with the rising success of Chinese companies, Chinese tech companies, is we're seeing that any sign of success being assigned to Washington, D.C., the U.S. government, as a threat, a challenge. And so anyone who is joining a Chinese company, and this would have been very clear to Kevin Mayer before he joined TikTok, is you need to be able, there's going to be challenges. You're going to need to be able to rise to those challenges and meet them. I mean, no one really expected the lengths to which the U.S. government would go to attack TikTok without, again, any proof whatsoever that they were doing anything wrong from a national security perspective. But these things come up all the time when you're running a company, when you're working in a company, whether it be marketing problems, PR problems, regulation problems. And if you sign on to be a CEO, I would expect that you would not be so quick to run away when the water got a little hot. And so those are my thoughts on that. And as a closing to that point, I would simply offer a reminder to those of you who are interested in potentially working in a Chinese company. It could be for entry-level position, could be for mid-level, could be even a senior executive level position. I mean, there's many opportunities, but you have to realize what you're getting into. It's not necessarily a horrible environment. I think it can be very rewarding, very inspiring, lots of places to learn and grow, but it's not going to be the same as joining a company in your home country, and you have to realize that. You have to realize there are going to be challenges, and if you're not willing to face them, if you think everything is going to be handed to you on a silver platter, then you probably should reconsider. Because these companies, they need skilled employees, they need skilled executives, not people that are going to just run away when things get a little harder. So, and again, I'm not saying that everyone should join a Chinese company, but you need to know what you're getting into, because I believe if you join a company, to a certain degree, you have a certain degree of an obligation, assuming they treat you okay, to make contributions because they're taking a risk by hiring you, you need to repay them back to a certain degree. Where that line is, when you have made those contributions to pay them back, I'm not sure, but again, something to consider. One last point, I'd like to make is because we've talked about how, certain ways Chinese companies maybe have hired people just for being foreign or being white in the past. We've talked about how there's many cultural or linguistical differences and barriers if you join a Chinese company. But I'd actually like to kind of close this video by saying, in some respects, I would almost say that Chinese companies are still more open than, maybe not Western companies, but American companies. Because think of it this way. There are so many Chinese companies that will hire employees and key executives to come over without speaking any or much Chinese. They can't read and write for sure. They don't maybe know the culture, but they're willing to come into their organization, and everyone in this organization has, or most of them, I should say, have learned that person's language or can speak with them. And so there is a lot of openness in accepting these outsiders, these people who are not from the culture or the linguistical background, and they're willing to try working with that. Whereas, think of it this way, what would happen, and as an American, I can specifically say what I think would happen about in the American context. What would happen in any American company if they tried to hire a Chinese executive to come over and join their team in the USA, and this Chinese executive didn't speak any English, couldn't read or write, didn't understand the culture or the society at all. How welcoming do you think other American employees and executives would be to this person if they had done no preparation from a cultural or linguistical point of view to join the office of an American company in America? Think on that, because I think once you think on that, it does put working for Chinese companies and how open they are in a little bit of a different context in your mind. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in. As a reminder, I do plan to talk more about TikTok in future videos, so if there's a certain angle that you're interested in hearing from me about, feel free to let me know in the comments section. I'd also really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel as well as my blog, thechinaculturecorner.com, and you can follow me on social media and reach out if you have any questions. Specifically, you can reach out to me on Twitter at SeanUM_China, and I'd be happy to talk more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.